Now, a scathing attack on punctuation in emails appears in this week's Spectator magazine. We wouldn't report that, by the way, as complaints about bad punctuation are all too familiar. But this was a particular and sophisticated take on the old theme, almost political. So here it is. Jacinda Maxton Graham analyses emails of this kind. Sorry, comma, been on the road all morning taking Thomas to the orthodontist, comma, manic end of holes, comma, really kind invitation though, comma, he'd love to join in, comma, what time would you like him? Well, Miss Maxton Graham notes the lack of full stops replaced by what she calls the weak comma. Now, she also hates the ... as well, as in, and Emily's friends aren't always reliable, ... Well, Miss Maxton Graham's theory is that we're scared of the assertiveness of the full stop. She writes, it feels safer to shroud one's remark in a gentle, liberal, unassertive comma, so no one can pin you down to being accountable for having actually made a statement. Well, that is a theory, but one that lends itself to critique, and few people are better placed to do that than Steven Pinker, author of the influential book, The Language Instinct. He joins us now from Harvard University. Thank you very much for joining us. Why do you think full stops and being replaced by commas and ... in email, Steven?
Well, we should be careful not to think that something that we notice now is a new development. People always are thinking that the language is going downhill, that people weren't as careful as they used to be. But, you look at the way people wrote 10 years ago, 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and the purists were complaining about problems in punctuation back then as well. Now, it is possible that people especially in email, which of course is an informal medium, are trying to convey a conversational style, to try to make their email more like conversation, where we really don't stop with and pause in between sentences. We might if we were giving a formal speech, but that's not the way conversation works, and that's of course one of the reasons why Siri and other programs that try to pull sentences out of speech have so much trouble. We just don't speak in neatly delineated sentences. Now, in some media, in student term papers, in magazine and newspaper articles, in books, it's a good idea to respect the conventions of punctuation, where there is a certain level of formality that's expected. But in media where we're trying not to be too formal, it's natural to expect our punctuation to reflect that.
So actually, because I use ... a lot, I'm saying, I think, I don't want to go into this in full, I'm being a bit informal, I'm actually telling them this kind of email is not a legal document. This is just a kind of quick, hastily written thing. But what do you think about the theory that we're kind of afraid of being assertive? Because she really writes that this is a sort of liberal defensiveness. We don't want to be too strong in our proclamations.
I think there is a grain of truth in that, and you also see it in the speech style known as uptalk, where you pronounce your declarative sentences as if you're asking a question, often attributed to Valley girls in California, but it's been spreading to the rest of the language. And in part, it is, I think, part of a long-term process of informalization in Western culture more generally, where compared to our great-grandparents, we try not to set ourselves up as authorities, as experts, as outranking the people that we're speaking to. You see this in styles of dress, which have become more informal. Gentlemen don't wear ties, women don't wear gloves and skirts. You see it in forms of address. We are much more likely to address people on a first name basis than Mr. and Mrs. So-and-so. And it's possible that this infects our writing style in cases where we don't want to seem as if we're lecturing to someone, if we're making pronouncements, but we're trying to simulate the egalitarian give and take of conversation in these forms of writing.
Yeah, no, that is very interesting. On the whole, you're associated with the kind of movement that is anti-pedant, aren't you? You're someone who really believes picking people up on grammatical mistakes, split infinitives, all of this is a bit of a waste of time. And presumably you're the same with punctuation pedants as you are with language pedants.
Well, I think that in certain kinds of writing, it is essential to maintain standards of punctuation. I'll often correct my graduate students' emails if they use a comma splice in where a semicolon is called for. I think it just very much depends on the context. There are certain kinds of writing where you really want to obey particular rules, including the rules for where you put a full stop and a semicolon. There are others in which it's not appropriate, where you would seem to be talking down or lecturing to your audience. And a skilled writer knows the audience and knows the medium or the forum and tailors his or her writing accordingly. The other problem with a lot of the rules of pedantry is that they're just not legitimate rules in the first place. A lot of them are just myths and folklore and never corresponded to the way that careful writers write. And that's a second reason that I'm skeptical of some of the rules of pedants. But the main one is that there are different forms of writing that are appropriate in different contexts.
All about
a casual
context.
email to a friend is not like a eulogy printed in a newspaper.
Stephen Pinker, thank you very much indeed.